ornaments and clever and superficial talk about Brahman fall into the current of samsara again and again, the cycle of birth and death due to the impact of that ignorance. So here is making a distinction between what might appear to be knowledge of Brahman and what constitutes real enlightenment. Those whose vritti, mental modification, we'll see what that means. Knowledge has ripened in the form of I am Brahman, and we'll see what that means. They alone are enlightened. Not just those who deal in words, those who nicely chant the Sanskrit and give translations, and not just those people. Why? Often it's easy to talk the talk, but to walk the talk is difficult. So Ramakrishna used to say, tabla, learn to play the tabla. Tabla bol, mukhe bola soja, hate tola mushkil. So to repeat the tabla, the notes of the tabla is easy, but actually play it is difficult. So similarly, it's easy to chant verses and even explain the Vedanta, but that does not mean the person is enlightened. Two levels. The traditional Vedantic learning, you had to memorize it and chant it. Even before you learned the meaning. So there would be people, there are even now, traditional Vedantic students who would chant the Upanishads, chant the Vedas. And do they know what they're chanting? They might not. It's just chanting, and that's difficult. And that takes years and years of practice. Huge amounts of material are chanted and thereby memorized. Now, just as an aside here, there is a method to this. There's a very big point in this. I remember reading this book, George Dreyfus. He is a well-known professor of Tibetan Buddhism. So he has written this book. He is the first Western person to complete the Tibetan Buddhist entire course of study as a monk, the Geshe degree. So he did it. The first Westerner to do it, and did it in the 1980s in India, in Dharmasala there, in one of the Tibetan monasteries there. So he has written a book, he's a professor now. He's written a book about Tibetan Buddhist monastic pedagogy, how they teach. And they have an extensive course of studies. And just like any other traditional form of Indian learning, they use chanting and memorizing. And this gentleman, George Dreyfus, he says that as a young man I became impatient, young Western man. I said, what's the point of just chanting in an alien language? I don't understand any of this masses of material. Let me understand the meanings and then chant. That sounds much more reasonable. His Tibetan masters didn't agree, but he said, let me do that. He says, years later I realized my error. I realized the material which I had chanted along with everybody else, rhythmically, day after day, without knowing the meaning. That material till today I remember. I can chant it right now. But the material which I worked hard on and understood the meaning and then chanted, I've forgotten all that now. It doesn't come back. Maybe some of the meaning is there, but the original words and they're simply gone. There are different circuits in the brain, it seems, neurologically speaking. So there is one kind of circuit is activated when you are not using your critical faculties, you're just chanting. Like poems, for example, which we might have memorized as little children. We might still be able to, poems and songs, recite those ones. I remember my own case. One of the Upanishads, which I memorized completely, I memorized it easily and completely, and I can chant the whole thing. The only one I can chant effortlessly right now, anytime, is the only one which I initially memorized without understanding the meaning. Because the teacher who was teaching us at that time, Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, in our monastery in India, and I was a brahmachari, a novice. So his method was a traditional method. He said first the brahmacharis, novices should chant the Upanishad, day after day, week after week. After a certain period, he would start teaching the meanings. And that Upanishad, the Keno Upanishad, is the only one which I learnt in that way, and I still remember it effortlessly. So George Dreyfus wrote a book about his experiences. The book is very wittily titled The Sound of Two Hands Clapping. I don't know if that will, not many people will get it. It's a play between two kinds of there's a well-known saying in Zen Buddhism called the sound of one hand clapping. There's something called koan, the sound of one hand clapping. You have to meditate on the sound of one hand clapping. Obviously, one hand doesn't make a sound, but still you have to meditate on that. This is a well-known saying, the sound of one hand clapping. Now, the Tibetan Buddhists, they engage in debate, philosophical debate, and they have elaborate hand gestures which will show, here is my counterpoint refuting your point, here is a point where like a checkmate in a debate. So they will do this. Sound of two hands clapping. So now the name of the book is a play of sound of one hand clapping and sound of two hands clapping. And that's a book on Tibetan monastic pedagogy. Okay. Why did I say all that? Oh, what he is saying here is, those who are experts in chanting, that's one level of learning. That doesn't mean they are enlightened. Those who are experts in chanting, they have memorized the whole thing, plus they know the meaning and they can explain it to you really well. They're really good at giving talks, especially on YouTube. That doesn't mean they are enlightened. Unless they have that breakthrough of the form I am Brahman, which is only internal, only they can know. If they have that, unless they have it, he says, Kushala Brahma Vartayam Vrittihina Suragina. Those who do not have that enlightenment, that breakthrough, that I am Brahman, that realization, that intuitive realization has not happened. One. Second, Suragina. On top of that, they have a variety of desires unfulfilled yet. So, I saw one cartoon. So a guy looking very smug and self-satisfied with wearing dark glasses, and it says, Mr. Most Views on YouTube. Mr. Most Views on YouTube. So there's a cartoon. So one has desires, name, fame, money, power, pleasure, and on top of that, Kushala Brahma Vartayam. Very good at explaining Vedanta. What happens to such people? But they don't have that realization that I am Brahman. What happens to such people? They sound enlightened. It's very easy to sound enlightened because this is a system of knowledge. You can just speak the words, it sounds enlightened. Te api ajnanataya. Their ignorance has not been destroyed. They do not really know that they are Brahman. They have not realized it. Nunam, surely, without any doubt, punarayanti yanti cha. They come and go in samsara just like everybody else. Just because you can chant the Vedas or you know the Sanskrit, just because you understand it also. Notice, there's a difference between understanding and enlightenment. Just because you understand it doesn't mean that a person is enlightened. And they can be as much a samsari, coming and going in samsara, being affected by samsara, being unhappy and sorrowful and negative and ignorant and subject to all the problems and vices of everybody else. So what constitutes enlightenment? So in this verse, this comes from the Tejovindu Upanishad, a clear distinction has been made between sounding enlightened, even teaching. There's nothing wrong in teaching, but that doesn't mean the person is an enlightened master. Doesn't mean that. It's not. There's no guarantee for that. See, here's the distinction. A person may, some other subject, economics, physics, mathematics. If a person has understood the subject very well and can teach it very well, we'll say he knows the subject. He or she knows the subject. That's it. But it's not so here. Can understand it, can teach it very well, but it quite possibly may not be enlightened. Now, it's also all right not to be enlightened. But one should not then claim or pretend to be enlightened. All right. Now, let's go deep into it. Note number 4. What I'm going to say is just going to summarize the stuff which is written on page 190 and 191 and 192. 3 pages. I'm just going to summarize what's said here. What is the source for this analysis which I'm going to present? Author of Bhamati in the Brahma Sutras. I mentioned this earlier. One of the greatest masters of non-dual Vedanta, Vachaspati Mishra. He lived about 1,000 years ago. And he started a prominent school of non-dualism. called the Bhamati school. So he was such a great master about 1,000 years ago. I've told this story earlier also, but let me just mention it here to refresh your memory of those who haven't heard it. It's a cute story. These are handed down by oral tradition, by pandits who teach us. So I've heard it from my teacher. The story goes like this. Vachaspati Mishra, he was household, he was married. And when he was a great scholar already very well known. When he was getting married, the story goes, as part of the marriage ceremony, it seems in those days, you would have to hear, the bridegroom and the bride and everybody else, the guests would have to hear a Vedanta talk. I'm sure they've dropped that part of the ceremony. From what I hear, Indian weddings have become bigger and fatter and more extravagant, but somehow Vedanta has been dropped from there. Anyhow, so Vedanta discussion is going on, and Vachaspati Mishra is sitting there. He's getting married, he's the bridegroom. And he says, hey, that's wrong. But he can't say anything because he's the bridegroom, he has to keep quiet. It's his marriage. So he said, wait, let me finish this marriage and then I will set it right. I'll write such a book which will clear up all these confusions forever. So right after his marriage, he gets down to it, starts writing his masterpiece, magnum opus. And so years go by. One day he's writing it, thinking and writing, it's evening. This lady comes in with a lamp and puts the lamp on his desk, where he's writing. And he's taken aback and he says, at this time, who's this woman? Who are you? And why have you come here at this time? And she says quietly, I'm your wife. This is the first time you have spoken to me, in 10, 15 years of marriage. You've been writing that book. And I've been taking care of the house and taking care of you and all of that. It's the first time you've noticed me. And he's very shocked and he's very sad. He says, oh, I've neglected my duty towards you. What can be done now? And he says, what's your name? Now that's not as ridiculous as it sounds, because in traditional Indian weddings, it's quite possible that in those days they wouldn't know each other's names before they got married. So, what's your name? And she says, it's Bhamati. And then he says, alright, this book, I'm going to name it after you. As long as Vedanta is studied, for centuries and millennia, people will know your name. And it's true, even now. It's the masterpiece of Vedanta. All traditional Vedanta scholars, all of them, will study this at least once. And look, we are hearing about it in Connecticut in 21st century. So she is still alive in our memory. It's a masterpiece. It's a very beautiful book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. He wrote books on Nyaya philosophy. He wrote a book on Yoga philosophy. He wrote a book on Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya Tattva Kaumudi, the moonlight of the essential points of Sankhya, Sankhya Tattva Kaumudi. And he wrote a book on the Mimamsa philosophy. So Vachaspati Mishra, and Vedanta, of course, his famous book on Vedanta is called Bhamati. He is known as, in Sanskrit, Sarvatantra Swatantra Acharya, the master who across disciplines, who has mastery across disciplines, across different philosophies. But his famous book is Bhamati, this book. Not this book, the book from which is being quoted now. In that book, he makes an analysis of what it means to be actually enlightened. Who is a jnani actually? And he says, there are 4 levels of Brahma Jnana, of knowledge of Brahman. 4 levels. I'll just summarize what he says there. First, if you study Vedanta and listen to the Vedantic teachings, and in today's age, if you listen to a book being taught over YouTube and all of that, so you have done what is called Shravana, hearing, study, systematically study. Not just one lecture, you study over time, months, years you study. And at the result of this study, what should happen? You should have a fair knowledge of what these texts are saying. I realize now that the Upanishads, the Kena Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Chandogya, Brihadaranya, what are they saying to me? They are saying to me that you are that, Tattvamasi, you are Brahman. One might say, okay, I knew that, so am I a knower of Brahman? No. You just know that the books say you are Brahman. But if you actually ever ask, show me how the books say that you are Brahman, we would be at a loss unless we have studied them. If we have studied them, then we know how these texts are coming together. Many things are there in these texts. How is it that, when you read a text which says many things, you want to know what's the essence of it. What's the point? what is the purport of it? So the purport of all of Vedanta is that you are Brahman. That if you can demonstrate by showing that all the texts, they all come together to show that you are Brahman. In Hindi they are saying, Moti baat bolo. I mean, tell me the main point. The main point is this, that you are Brahman. If you have completed a course of studies in Vedanta and you know what these texts are saying, you are a knower of Brahman. You are. That's the first level of knowledge of Brahman. After all, you can say, why can't you say? You can say, I know what Brahman is. I know that I am Brahman, supposedly, quote unquote. I know that these books are telling me that. So that is one level. That's the first level of knowledge. What this level of knowledge does is, technically they say there's something called pramana samshaya, pramanagata samshaya, a doubt about what the sources of knowledge are telling me. The sources of knowledge are the Upanishads. What are the Upanishads? What are books like Vivek Chudamani and this book and all of these Yoga Vasishta? What are they saying? Now I know. I'm very clear about that. You can't shake me on that. Then I am a knower of Brahman. But this is just the first level. So this is first level. You have completed Shravana. That's one kind of knowledge of Brahman. One kind. Second, now I may know all this, but I may not get it. It's not clear to me. How am I Brahman? What is Brahman? Does such a Brahman exist? Is it real or is it just theory or speculation? So when we delve into it, and all kinds of questions come, and we battle with it through reasoning, a long, sustained process of logical reasoning, arguments, refutations, counter-refutations, which are there in these texts and which the teachers will guide you through. You come to the second level of knowledge of Brahman, which is called understanding. First is textual knowledge. But one can have textual knowledge without really understanding it. So at the end of the first level, you can say, I know what the book says. At the end of the second level of knowledge of Brahman, you will say, I not only know what the books say, I also understand it. I can teach you also. I am clear about it. You can't shake me. Any question you ask, I've got the answer for that. That's the second level. That is completed when you have done what is called manana. That's also part of the study and a prolonged period of study. I have so many stories. Let me tell you, stories make things interesting. This master I used to go to, he has passed away now, Ramananda Saraswati. I saw him only for 2 months. But he says about his guru, his guru's guru. So, this Swami from whom I heard this, his guru's guru. His guru's guru name was Swami Vijnanananda, one who was the guru of the Maharaja of Tehri in Uttarakhand. So that was a small kingdom at that time. And the king was a very pious man, and he had a guru who was a great jnani. So this Swami Vijnanananda. And the connection with us is our own Swami Turiyananda. Swami Turiyananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, great Vedantin. He met Swami Vijnanananda. And he has mentioned in his, there are reminiscences of the conversations with Swami Turiyananda, where Swami Turiyananda mentions among the best, the greatest sadhus he has seen in the mountains, in the Himalayas. He mentions a few. He mentions this Swami Vijnanananda. He says he was a tremendous scholar, a very saintly man, enlightened person who used to live in a cottage in the mountains in the Himalayas, and he was the guru of the king of Tehri. And one thing he mentions about Swami Vijnanananda, which will be relevant, Swami Turiyananda tells us in our tradition. He says, all of it, the Upanishads and the commentaries of Shankaracharya, he had memorized all of that. He never needed any books to teach any of it. All of it was in his memory. Now, more details about this Vijnanananda is that he was, as a youngster, he had come from Karnataka probably, from the south of India. And he had come to Banaras, which was the seat of Advaitic, of all kinds of Sanskrit learning also at that time. So he had come there to study as a brahmachari. He studied there for 12 years. He was a star pupil, what would you call, summa cum laude or something. And he has tremendous power of memory. He had memorized all the texts and so on. Graduated, he was going to go back and start his own school, back to his home state or home province. on the way there was a great debate, and a great Pandit had come from Maharashtra who was challenging all other Pandits to debates. So this young man, upstart, he also said, let me try out my newly, what I've all mastered, So he went to the debate, and he challenged this great Pandit who had come from Maharashtra. It was a great debate, and this person who later became Swami Vijnanananda, he lost the debate. He was stunned. He thought, nobody's like me, the arrogance of youth, you think I've mastered it all, who knows? Who knows this stuff better than me? He was so shocked, he went back to Banaras again. He changed his plans. And he studied 12 years more. But the next 12 years, he did not learn new things. He went back to old things. And he saw, the description is interesting. He thought about it. Whatever he had learned, he thought he had understood. But he said he thought all over. 12 years again. He just sat and thought about it. Who is it who says? Tennyson? That not to see new things, but to see new old things with new eyes. Ulysses, that poem is there. So anyway, and then he had, after 12 more years, this young man, he goes again and goes in search of that Pandit from Maharashtra, and lands up in Pune and finds that Pandit. And another great, what they used to call them Shastra, the debates on the texts, debates on the Shastras. He was going on. And this young man goes in there and challenges that Pandit again. And there's a great debate ensues. And so this Swami actually had heard the story from his guru, had heard it from Swami Vivekananda himself. So it's very like a graphic description, So finally when this young man defeats that great scholar, he even shows what had happened. This is well over 100 years ago, 200 years nearly. So this, he said in Hindi, he's saying, "Wo aise ho gaye." The great scholar, he says, sat like this. He couldn't even lift his head. He was so shocked that he had been defeated. And his disciples had to carry him out on a stretcher. And 3 days later, that great scholar died. He never recovered. And this young scholar, he sat and thought again, what is the total, sum total of all of my 24 years of study of the great scriptures and the mass of learning? The greatest sin that is done in India is, it's called Brahma Hatya, to kill a learned Brahmin. So I have murdered a learned Brahmin. This is the sum and substance of all my great learning. And because of the devastating psychological blow of the defeat, the person. So he gave everything up. He became a monk. He wandered in the Himalayas for many years. He performed intense austerities until he actually became enlightened and then a great master. So that's the origin story of Swami Vivekananda. I hope it was a nice story. Now we go deeper. So he was at the second level. First level, he learnt it all, 12 years. But he was defeated in debate because he had not really understood what he had learned. Second level, 12 more years. He learnt it and he reached the second level of knowledge of Brahman or any other scripture, I don't know. But that's not enlightenment. Then comes the third level. You know that the texts are telling you are Brahman. And after we begin to understand how I am Brahman, I am this awareness to which the world appears, the body appears, the mind appears. At some time it becomes absolutely clear. It's so simple, so direct. This absolute clarity which you get. Then what you should do, the third level, is stay with this clarity. We have stayed with our identity as a body, as this person. I am a man, I am Sarvapriyananda, I am Indian, I am this is my height and weight and this is what I do. This is the identity, the body identity, the mind identity, the person identity. I have stayed with and meditated, quote unquote, on this for so many years of my life. Meditated means you have acted accordingly. It's meditation. Now you have to reverse it. What you have realized, if you truly realize that you are awareness itself, not body with awareness. All of us agree to that. We are bodies with awareness. Who agree? Who will disagree that you? Who will say I am a zombie? We all have awareness. But that's not what Vedanta says. Vedanta reverses it. It says you are awareness with the body. Now stay with that understanding. That I am not the body, I am that awareness to which this body appears. I am not the mind, I am the awareness to which the mind appears. I am not this person Sarvapriyananda. I am awareness itself, the impersonal awareness to which the person Sarvapriyananda is a layer, is an appearance. And stay with that. Meditate upon that. In the Gita, Krishna says, Atma sangstam manakritva na kinchidapi chintayet. Center your attention of the mind, on this witness consciousness which you have understood. You have already understood this. Center the attention of the mind on that. Na kinchidapi chintayet. Don't let the mind wander here and there anymore. Not easy at all. Spend hours and hours like that. And deny the body mind. When the body mind, they act up and they demand, let's take a little walk. No. Why walk? I don't want to take a walk. See, what happens is this. You realize you are the witness consciousness. The witness consciousness is not affected by desires of the mind. But unless the difference is clear and you have identified yourself firmly with the witness consciousness as Sakshi, the chances because of our past ways of behaving, we will start behaving as the body mind, contradicting our own understanding. If a worldly person who thinks I am this person and behaves as this person, perfectly alright, that's the natural state, that's samsara. But now you have understood clearly that you are the witness consciousness, but you continue to behave as that person. The mind can trick. What the mind does is, it has all these desires. Now it will put those desires on you, the witness consciousness, and make you believe these are my desires, which we used to believe earlier, before becoming enlightened, before realizing I am witness consciousness. But still you will believe and behave accordingly. They sabotage your quote-unquote knowledge of Brahman. How? One sadhu told a very nice story. It's a real story. I will not take the names. This was long ago, 1960s. There was a Prime Minister of India at that time. Very nice gentleman, very honest person. When it came to his notice, there's a lot of corruption and bribery. He announced that I'm going to have, darbar, like the kings of old used to have, open court. People can come and complain about the officials and ministers in my government and can tell me, and I'll take action against them. Anything about corruption in my government, come. Now what happened was, the gentleman didn't know, the Prime Minister is a good person, he didn't know. What happened was, in order to meet the Prime Minister, you have to enter the office, the bungalow, and the servant there, the peon there, he would take bribes to so, to take your complaint about corruption to there is corruption right there. And he gave this example, the Swami gave this example, this is what happens. You may realize your witness consciousness. You may feel that I am not the body, not the mind. But the mind and the senses will continuously sabotage your efforts. So, at this level, one needs to remain as the witness consciousness. What happens here is, the mind with its conditionings, desires, negativities, bias, prejudice, all of it, what the mind is filled with, good and bad, mostly negative, it will keep projecting on you. The technical way of putting this is called mutual superimposition. What happens is, the mind becomes identified with consciousness, so the contents of the mind become identified with consciousness. And then consciousness feels, this is what I like to eat, this is what I don't like to eat. That's the tongue, not consciousness. But it feels, I like to eat this and I don't like to eat that. These are the people I like, these are the people I don't like. That's the mind, personality, that's not pure consciousness. But that's what consciousness feels. It feels like that. I like, I dislike, I want, I don't want, I prefer, I don't prefer. All of this comes from the mind and the senses and is put on consciousness. And what do the mind and the senses borrow from consciousness? They borrow existence, awareness, and bliss. Things which have no existence in themselves, the joys of the world, pleasures, they seem to have existence. Because of the presence of consciousness, it becomes an experience, anubhuti, to eat, to drink, to enjoy, to make merry. These are anubhuti experiences, pleasurable experiences. And the pleasure also comes from, that's the biggest cheat of all. The pleasures which are promised in the world, they're all borrowed from you. and then given back to you, as if they've been given from the world. So this is what is happening. How do you overcome that? At the third stage, we have to remain centered in our newfound understanding as witness consciousness. Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, not only to chant it, not only to understand it, but to remain in that awareness so that we can begin baby steps to walk, to act like that. How do you act? That's a Jivan Mukta saint, a spiritually advanced person, how those people live. There are many such examples. Can we start living like that? So that is the third stage of the knower of Brahman. We're all talking about knowledge of Brahman. Third stage of the level of the knowledge of Brahman, this is called Nididhyasana. It's all according to Vachaspati Mishra. Nididhyasana. What is Nididhyasana? A fancy word for meditation. Non-dual meditation. What is done here? The Viparita Bhavana. Technical word is Viparita Bhavana. Contrary tendencies. I am witness consciousness, but I continue to behave like a mind, like a body. These are contrary tendencies. Those tendencies are overcome by staying, continuously reinforcing my newfound understanding that I am witness consciousness and trying to live like that. Especially, the good situations, useful situations are the difficult situations. Physical illness, tiredness, difficult people. Another very interesting thing. Excellent spiritual practice. Excellent spiritual practice. World will liberally supply you with opportunities. Difficult people. Saints sometimes generate ways of trying to practice this. I remember reading about the desert fathers. Early Christianity, they used to go out into the desert and practice austerities. So there's a story of the desert fathers. One of them says to the other, "Brother, we must be very, very austere people, had no possessions in the world, lived in a cottage and begged for their food. Brother, I would like to experience quarreling, like the worldly people quarrel, let us experience quarreling." The other one said, "All right, brother, as you say. What I will do is this brick, I will say it is mine, you will say it is yours, and then we will fight over this brick." "All right, brother, as you say." And this man said, "It is mine." And the other one said, "All right, brother, as you say, it is yours." So, we must live according to that. If I am pure consciousness, what difference does it make to me? So, whether a person is saying something good or bad, how you have to live? Upanishads say, having eyes as if he has no eyes, having ears as if you have no ears, having a prana as if you have no prana, fully awake to the world and functioning as if you are in deep sleep. Not easy at all, but it can be done. And if you stay as the witness consciousness, you can do it. If you slip back into the body mind, you will be overwhelmed. Finished. This practice is called Nididhyasana. If you do it for a long time, that is the third level of knowledge of Brahman. Then Vachaspati Mishra drops the hammer. He says, all of these, they are what is called sadhana koti. These are practices. This is not enlightenment. The first level of knowledge of Brahman, which tells you, all of your study is telling you are Brahman. That much. That level, which you learn after 12 years of study. That is one level. It's practice. Second, when you work hard at it and you understand all the subtle argument and logic and you can answer every question, you are firmly confident. You can defeat the greatest scholar in the land who opposes you and who will probably die of shame afterwards. Second level of knowledge of Brahman. It's a practice, you are not enlightened. And you have understood now, you are clear about it. You stay with that understanding, long hours of meditation, live like that, struggle with our own negativities. Third level of knowledge of Brahman, not enlightenment. And then he says, these three, the third one, prolong it for a long enough time, it will deepen into enlightenment, which is the fourth level, he calls it. It's Brahmakara Vritti. The technical term used is Brahmakara Vritti. Vritti means movement of the mind, a flash in the mind. So I see a book, this is called book, Vritti of the form of book. I see a man, Vritti of the form of a man. So book akara vritti, man akara vritti, similarly Brahmakara vritti. the movement, that flash, intuitive grasp, I am Brahman, it suddenly becomes clear to you. There's no more doubt. It is no longer at the level of understanding. See, right now I'm standing before you, I feel I'm Sarvapriyananda. It's not a understanding, it's not logic, it's not that I have read somewhere I'm Sarvapriyananda. Not because it was announced Swami Sarvapriyananda is going to speak, so I thought I must be Sarvapriyananda, so I am Sarvapriyananda. Not like that. I know it's a fact for me. Like that, it must be a fact. I am pure consciousness. Effortlessly. When that becomes a fact, it's called Brahmakara Vritti. Then Vachaspati Mishra says that Sadhya Koti, that is the goal, that is called enlightenment. So already 3 things have been accomplished. You know the entire teaching of Vedanta, I am Brahman. You have understood it also fully, with full confidence and clarity, I am Brahman. And third, it has become clear to you, you can stay with it as I am Brahman and live accordingly, I am Brahman. These 3 are practices. They are knowledge of Brahman, first stage, second stage, third stage, but they are all practice, at the level of practice. It's called sadhana koti, in the category of sadhana. It's a simple Sanskrit. Sadhana means practice. And this Brahmakara Vritti is called sadhya koti, the goal, the aim. That is enlightenment. In English we will call it enlightenment. That there is a clear moment of a flash, of a breakthrough, after which it becomes effortless. I don't have to practice being Sarvapriyananda now. Not that morning and evening, are you doing your daily Sarvapriyananda practice? No, I don't need to. It's an effortless thing for me. It's a useless thing, but an effortless thing. Similarly, the realization that your Brahman is very useful for you, very good for you, and should become effortless. Then it becomes, this is called enlightenment. You are a Brahmajnani. You are truly a Brahmajnani. That 4th level is real knowledge of Brahman. Sadhya Koti. It is also called